Well, folks, everybody now knows what's headed, what we're getting in the next couple of months. And the consequences of this are going to be so far reaching that there may be no reversing it at this point. We have a minority imposing their will on the majority without restraint. We have a weak, feckless, and bought-off party that won't fight back. We have 8 other parties in this country that have been disenfranchised by ownership and manipulation of the system itself. People are losing their rights faster than we can blink. And there seems to be no stopping it. The media is complicit. They won't do anything. They won't call it out. Very, very few people with the most connections, the most capital, the most ruthlessness in their blood are the ones calling the shots. We have been a constitutional republic and representative democracy in this country for over 200 years. About 246 years by my count. But now maybe it's, 246 years. I honestly think now, given the circumstances, everything we've encountered, everything we're learning, everything that's, we try. We've been trying for years now, and everything is just, it's blocked off. Everything's been captured. Everything's been manipulated to benefit those at the top. There's no way that people like us can get representation because we don't have enough capital to make it worth their while. And it speaks to the point that I make all the time about how we can't have capitalism and democracy in the same setting. More times than not, capitalism wins because money talks. But that's because in capitalism, so few people control the money. Now, if you had a more socialist setting, it would be the people who could make those decisions. It would be our votes that determine where our tax money goes. It would be our votes in the workplace that could determine what a CEO will make. It would be our votes in the workplace that would determine whether we have shareholders. And if we do, whether we keep it internal, which I think if you're going to keep the stock market private, that's a good idea, to just have, okay, your company's stock is only going to have ownership by the workers. So they have all the capital within that. So they decide, okay, what is going to be our returns on our investments, what's going to be our take-home pay, so on and so forth. A more democratic setting, it would be a more fair and just system, right? Well, we don't have that now. There are some people who say that we were never meant to be a democracy. We were not meant to have the people in charge. Maybe to an extent that's true. But you know what? The majority of Americans, the vast majority of Americans believe in democracy. We may not be a true democracy, let alone a social democracy. But we do believe in it. We do want it. We want more say over what happens in this country. And I think, take from this what you will, guys, but I think the way out now is to form a people's parliament. You heard me. We at the grassroots need to organize and form a people's parliament, representation by county, which is my idea there. Every party is welcomed in by default. There will be no ownership of 2 parties with all the capital. And the capital part I'll address in a later video. But here, we have, by my count, 10 voting blocks. 10. We have independents, Democrats, Republicans, Libertarians, Greens, Socialists, Democratic Socialists of America, Communists, Forward Party, and the People's Party. Count them. That's 10. 10 voting contingents of this country, and 8 of them are kept out of the process entirely. We are effectively, as Americans, a people without a government. We get taxed by billionaire oligarchs who do with our tax money whatever they want, and we have no recourse except at the ballot box. And we have one group in particular, the Republicans, who will rig that process however they can, and it's all legal. So the minority has an unfair advantage here. They will make it so that everything goes their way in the future. And they're well on their way to doing it with this overturning of Roe v. Wade that's coming. Let's be clear. This is just an opinion that was leaked, okay? You still have the Roe v. Wade rights at the moment. This could change, but all indications are that it won't. So let's say that it is overturned. That's only the beginning. They're going to come for gay marriage. They're going to come for, I don't think they'll go as far as interracial marriage. I think that one will be left alone. But I think they will go for the minimum wage. I think they'll go for things like Social Security, for Medicare, Medicaid, all that stuff's going to be like, oh, that's unconstitutional. Government can't tax you for that. And it will be left up to the states, of course. But just like the marijuana thing that's happening across the country, states are legalizing marijuana left and right. Well, we're losing more than we're gaining. And this government, this Congress, what I call the corporate Congress, that's bought off and paid for by billionaires and corporations, they will never represent the people. They have no interest in it. Some of them may go in there with noble intentions at first, but they get so caught up in just that groupthink that happens when you're surrounded by it. You know, it's like jumping in a pool. You can't breathe air in a pool, right? If you're underwater, you have to give in. You have to just hold it in and not breathe, or wear the proper gear. You know what I'm saying? I know that's a little bit of a weird comparison, but the principle's somewhat the same. When you're surrounded by an environment in which there's no way out but to conform, your system is broken. It's no longer representative of the people. The Constitution may not allow this in the traditional sense, but I got news for you guys. The Democrats and Republicans don't care about the Constitution either. They don't. They use it as a weapon to preserve and protect their own power and their own wealth, and they only use it and interpret it in certain ways that benefit them when the occasion calls for it. The Constitution, in many ways, is so vague that you're always going to have these debates and this separation. So I think in this respect, this country was set up to fail from the beginning. The Constitution, we need to take that Constitution ourselves. We need to revisit it. We need to rewrite it, spell it out clearly, what are rights, what are not rights, very, very clear, definitive language. So there's no room for interpretation. Alternative interpretations, I should say. And we need to make it so that it serves the benefit of all people. It's too vague. It's too aimed at Congress and the rich and corporations having all the power, and the rest of us just have to shut up and live with the consequences. That's not a fair society. It's not just. It's not going to lead to prosperity or liberty or freedom. It's going to lead to tyranny through capitalism. We need to change that by forming a people's parliament. We need a new government. Now, the way this would work is we would have representation by county. How many counties are there? I really don't know how many counties there are. Hold on, let me check this out. Hey Siri, how many counties are in the United States? Working.
On it.
I like that, right? She's lazy this morning. Oh my God! You know what? Heck with it. Let me type it in here 1 second. All right. How many counties are in the U.S.? There we are. Okay, there are a total of 3,006 counties in the United States. That means with a parliamentary body like this, we'd be looking at over 3,000 representatives. Now, Jill Stein had this idea of representation by zip code, and unfortunately, her representation by zip code, that's over 41,000 representatives. That's a lot. Now, you could still do that if you wanted to. This one just seems a little more practical, in my eyes anyway, a little more something you could do sooner. We could talk about representation by zip code at a later time, I think. But this one I just thought was a little more doable for right now. So what this would mean is 3,006 representatives in total, okay? So you would basically have all 10 parties be able to run on ballots in a ranked choice voting arrangement in all counties. The MPs, okay, the members of parliament, would be serving congruent terms with the executive. 4 years. We can keep it at 4 years. And that means every 4 years at the federal level, we would also have on the ballot the 10 commons that we would vote on in order in a ranked choice arrangement to determine where we want our tax money to be used and in what order. What issue takes precedent over what else? Because everything has to take a backseat to something once in a while, right? So let's see. 10 basic commons, I say. Now let me see if I get this straight here. We have healthcare, education, infrastructure, police, military, firefighting, housing, food, and utilities. There was one more. One more. I'm blanking. I hate it when I do this. What was the 10th one? Utilities, food. Utilities, food. I believe it was agriculture. I want to say it was agriculture. I'll get back to you on that at a later time. I could be. I used to have that one memorized, but oh well. It was in the priorities amendment, but you get the point of what I'm saying. So we do that. We vote on them in an order. Like we take the average of all the votes in the country, and the average of all of them taken together will come to an order that says, okay, let's say we want infrastructure first as a nation, and we want healthcare second. We want education third. We want the military fourth. We want utilities fifth. And so on. You get the point, right? It could be any number of things in any order. And then that's an order form given to the parliament to say, this is what you must address immediately. No discretionary spending. This has to be done now. No ifs, ands, or buts. No delays. No anything. And if it's delayed, the Constitutional Guardians of America, a civilian corps, representation by zip code, by the way, would be able to come together and say, okay, this order is not being met by the parliament because they're stalling or they got something going on here, whatever the case is. Maybe you got some people that are corrupt in there. So they're going to pick that ball up and they're going to say, okay, we're going to submit this to the Treasury and they're going to disperse the funds by way of the CGA. And this happens after a certain deadline. And the deadline, of course, you can talk about at a later date. But that's kind of the gist of how that would work. So our tax money, we would vote on it. We would have it used for what we need, regardless of what the members of parliament, what their motives are. So you got that. The chief executive, we can call him whatever we want. We can still keep president, call him a chancellor, call them a prime minister, whatever you want to do. And it would be 4 years. And the way it would work at a national level, it wouldn't be state by state. It would be ranked choice voting, strictly popular vote. And if the winner were to be removed, died, resigned, well then the successor wouldn't be the vice presidential pick, because the vice presidential pick would be a separate race in this system. Same process, by the way. And what would happen is the successor would be the one who came in second in the first round of voting on the ranked choice ballot. Now let's say you had all 10 candidates running in a race, all 10 parties, and let's say, for instance, the Republican won. Well, what if the Republican dies, resigns, or is ousted? Well, before the term is up. And let's say you had the independent who came in number 2. That means the independent would take over as president automatically. And if that person's term gets ousted before the 4 years are up, well then, let's say the Democrat came in third. Well then the Democrat would take over, and so on and so forth. So that's how that would work. The judicial system, of course, we'd still have a regular court system, kind of like what we have now, except they would be able to be challenged by the constitutional guardians of America. So if, for instance, Roe v. Wade were overturned, and then the CGA looked at this and said, okay, we're challenging this. We don't agree with it. Here's our reasoning. We're bringing it back to you guys. And if our majority vote says that, the people have a right to an abortion, well, then the CGA, by that popular vote, once they've submitted their intention to the court, can override the court. Because you got to understand, these are unelected people, these court justices, which, by the way, would be great if we could elect them, right, and have term limits on them. But the CGA would basically be able to take any rulings and say, whoa, 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 there's some chicanery going on here, or there's an ulterior motive here, or there was political motivation of a certain kind that the people don't agree with, which is not true of a representative democracy or even a parliamentary system like we have, like what I'm suggesting here. So they would be able to overturn a court ruling if they deem necessary. And they would be much more rooted in where the people are because of the zip code representation. They're right next to the people. They are the people, really. So they could come together and say, and depending on who it affects, where it affects all of them, all 41,000 of them could come together and say, listen, Supreme Court, we don't agree with this. We're going to take a vote on it. We're going to review it. And our rule overrides yours. And the Supreme Court, of course, would be able to challenge this and go to Parliament. But, depending on that, they know that if they go against the CGA in this case, well, then that would go right back to the voters, and the voters would punish whoever did it, whoever went against them and sided with the Supreme Court on an issue like Roe v. Wade. So that's part of how I have this thing laid out. It's obviously a work in progress. I'd love to hear what you guys think about this. Now, some people would call it treason. Some people call it sedition. I call it self-preservation, as did many of the colonials who rebelled against the British Crown. They wanted to be free to make their own decisions, right? Well, we can't make our own decisions with the government we have now because of the influence of big capital. If we have in our Constitution the right to health care, the right to have food on your plate, the right to a roof over your head, the right to a job, or if you want to start a business, you have a right to do that, the right to a union if you want one, and our tax money being democratically voted on at the ballot box, things of that nature, and publicly funded elections, no private money allowed, it would be a much better system overall. It would be much better representative of the will of the people, and we need that going forward. I truly believe at this point that a different government, a more democratic arrangement with everybody included, is the really only way forward at this point, because all the institutions, the traditional channels with what we've had in place for over 240 years, they've all been compromised. They've all been captured by big money interests. We can't win this. We can't win by trying to reform the system from within. How many people are going to die in the process before it's too late? If we really want to save ourselves, we want to save the planet, we want to restore dignity, honor, and integrity to this country, we want to put it on the right course, this is what needs to happen. I'm not going to lie, guys. This would probably result in violence. The establishment, the Congress, whoever the president is at the time, would probably send in the mercenaries, the military, whatever, to try to crush any kind of this type of dissent. Well, that just proves it right there. They don't care about the Constitution. They had no interest in representing the people. So we would have to be ready for that. And I'm not advocating for violence, mind you. I'm just being realistic about this. We would have to be ready. And unfortunately, as a people, we're a long way away from being ready for anything like that. So we need to get the ball rolling. We need to get things moving. And yeah, let me know what you think about this in the comments. And I will be back later on, guys.